Hello, beautiful soul. Welcome to Jinjin's Cosmic. If you didn't happen to be here, perhaps it's time to meet your soul. Maybe you're hearing these words because something inside you just echoed. A strange, familiar feeling. Why do I feel so alone in a world that never stops moving? If you're an Aquarius, and your life path number is 1, then that feeling isn't foreign, it's part of your soul's truth. You think differently, you feel deeply, you live outside the lines. And maybe more than once you've sat in silence, watching others follow the usual path, while something inside you whispered, "Is something wrong with me? Or did I just show up in the wrong era?" If that sounds like you, welcome to Jinjin's Cosmic, a place where you don't have to be like anyone else. Here, you don't have to explain yourself. You don't have to make sense. You don't have to speak in ways that make others feel comfortable. You only need to be honest with your own frequency, because the deepest healing always begins within. And if you're an Aquarius and a life path 1, then you are exactly the kind of soul the world either tries to follow or avoids because your light is just too bright. But here's the truth. You were born to lead the way. Quietly, steadily, and beautifully. Follow me and let me create more videos just for you. When you're an Aquarius, and your life path number is 1, you're not just a soul born for the future. You're a soul stuck navigating a world that hasn't caught up yet. Aquarius is the sign of revolution, evolution, and radical ideas. You are the one who dares to ask, "But why does it have to be this way?" Even when no one else has the courage to ask at all. And life path 1? That's the energy of beginnings, of personal will, of a belief in walking a path no one has walked before, without needing anyone's permission to do so. This combination, if misunderstood or suppressed, can feel isolating. It can feel like being deeply misplaced, like wanting to disappear, not because you're weak, but because the world simply doesn't have space yet for the kind of footsteps you were born to leave. I still remember a client from Jinjin's Cosmic. Her name was Amelia, born in 1991. An Aquarius, life path 1. She worked in AI design, brilliantly so, but could never seem to stay at any job for long. And during one of our numerology sessions, she said something I've never forgotten. "I can do the work, I just don't feel like I belong anywhere." She'd been called stubborn by her bosses, impulsive and idealistic by her co-workers. Until one day, she understood. She wasn't here to fit into an existing system. She was here to build a new one. She wasn't difficult. She was just being honest with her own frequency. And that's something I see often in this space. Aquarius plus life path, 1 souls who feel out of place. But the truth is, they were simply born early. Another student, Min, a quiet voice in education, once told me, "I talk about new models for learning, but people at school think I'm crazy." When he read his numerology chart, he cried. Not because he found an answer, but because for the first time, he felt understood without being judged. I often tell my clients at Jinjin's Cosmic, Aquarius, life path 1 is the soul of a pioneer. And no pioneer walks forward without shedding a little blood. No path breaker feels anything but alone, at least in the beginning. But here's the gift hidden in that aloneness. You get to see a world that's never existed before, and you get to be the first one to touch it. So if you hear your story in Amelia's or Min's, maybe you're carrying the same kind of light, the light of someone who came to lead. And if the world hasn't greeted you with applause, that's okay. The universe is watching you with a depth of understanding that no spotlight could ever offer. May you always be brave enough to walk a road no one has drawn, and gentle enough to know you don't need to make sense. You just need to be true. When an Aquarius with a life path number 1 is aligned with their core energy, you can always tell even when they're doing everything they can to hide it. People like you often come up with ideas, while others are still trying to define the problem. You tend to be one step ahead, and sometimes 10, but rarely feel the need to say it out loud. At Jin's Cosmic, I've met so many souls like you. Game changers, if only they would believe that their difference is a gift, not a flaw. One student named Nun, 42, a high school teacher, Aquarius, life path 1, once told me, "I don't know why, but every time I speak up in a faculty meeting, everyone just goes quiet. No argument, no praise, just this look, like I just said something from another planet." And I asked her, "After you speak, do people sometimes quietly act on your idea anyway?" She laughed, then nodded. "Yes, but no one ever mentions me. It's like I'm invisible." And I told her, just as I'm telling you now, you don't need to be loud. You only need to be present in the right place at the right time, and the whole room will shift around you. That is the energy of an aligned Aquarius 1. No need to chase the spotlight, no need to convince, and yet, you still open paths others couldn't even see. At Jin's Cosmic, we have a concept called field-led space. It's where Aquarius 1s learn not to force their brilliance into words, but to trust their presence, to let their intuition lead instead. Another soul, Tien, a college student in communications, was part of this same alignment. They were often called too mature, too weird, too deep, always talking in riddles. But once Tien stopped trying to blend in and started listening inward instead, something shifted. They created a small TikTok channel, sharing insights about technology and human nature. 3 months later, they had over 80,000 followers, not from chasing trends, but by standing still in their truth. Their energy couldn't be copied, because no one can mimic an Aquarius 1 living from their center. If you've ever stayed silent in a crowd, and then said one sentence that suddenly made the room fall quiet, that wasn't coincidence. That was your field activating. That was you, living from your soul. May you always be brave enough not to dim your light just because others haven't adjusted to its brightness. And may you love yourself enough to know that you don't have to lead with words when your very presence is already the compass. When an Aquarius with life path 1 lives out of alignment, they're still brilliant, still creative. But instead of shining effortlessly, they start to armor up to protect their space, their ideas, and sometimes their very existence. At Jin's Cosmic, I've met many souls with this rare and intense combination. They're wildly innovative, but the longer they live, the more exhausted they become. Exhausted from having to re-explain the entire world every time they speak. Exhausted because no one seems deep enough to realize that behind all that fierceness is a soul that's incredibly soft. I remember one student named Koi, working in fintech. During a group healing session, he said, "I feel like everyone's wrong, but I'm tired of having to prove it all the time." Sometimes I just want to stay quiet, but when I do, I feel worthless. The room went silent, and I asked him, Koi, have you ever considered maybe people don't need you to be right? Maybe they just need you to be here, real, human. He froze, and then, for the first time, he cried. At Jinjin's Cosmic, I meet many like him. Souls who woke up early but never had a safe place to be soft. They know how to love, but only after their intelligence is validated, and that's the paradox. They crave to be loved, but they rarely let themselves be loved, because they're always in the role of the teacher. And living like that, it's exhausting. They don't live from the heart. They live from a never-ending loop of explanation, just to prove I deserve to exist. Another client, Lynn, a marketing director in healthcare, also Aquarius, Life Path 1, once told me, I had a wonderful partner, but I left him because I always felt like I had to teach him something, like I couldn't just be with him. After our session, she said, I never thought that I could be loved without trying to be excellent. And maybe that's the heaviest burden of an unaligned Aquarius 1. You believe you have to be better than others just to be allowed to stay. But sometimes, you just need to stay as a human being, and that's enough. May you always remember, you don't have to be right to be loved. You just have to be real. And sometimes, the most right thing you'll ever do is to stop trying so hard to be right. When an Aquarius with Life Path 1 enters the distorted phase, they no longer lead with their light, but with the shadow of isolation. At this point, the ego is no longer a loyal companion for protection. It becomes a golden prison. They sit in brilliance, but can no longer feel truly connected to anyone. I once worked with a client at Jinjin's Cosmic named Ryan, a creative strategist in content production. Incredibly gifted, sharp, intuitive, able to see 5 steps ahead of everyone in the room. But talent wasn't the issue. The issue was, every time someone disagreed or didn't follow his vision, Ryan assumed they simply didn't get it yet. He once said to me, without hesitation, I don't want to waste time explaining things to people who aren't on my frequency. And I understood. Aquarians 1s often feel the pulse of truth, long before others even ask the question. But in this phase of distortion, intuition becomes judgment. Independence becomes isolation dressed up as superiority. And the result? Ryan could no longer work in teams. People began to pull away. He was still brilliant, but more and more, he was brilliant alone. Another colleague of mine, also an Aquarius Life Path 1, once built a passionate team that adored him. But over time, he began to feel they just couldn't keep up with his vision. He didn't get angry. He didn't lash out. He simply picked up speed, moved faster, and left them behind. And one day, when he finally looked back, no one was there anymore. I remember telling him something that I now want to offer to you. If you feel like you're trapped in this same distorted 1 phase, they don't need to keep up with you. They just need you not to leave them behind. At Jinjin's Cosmic, we call this the illusion of the lonely awakened one. It's the belief that your uniqueness means you must always walk alone. But true leadership doesn't come from racing ahead. It comes from slowing down so that those behind you don't get lost. If you find yourself caught in the spiral of "no one understands me," take a slower breath. Maybe they don't need to understand you. Maybe they just need you to let them stay, even if they're not like you yet. And maybe, just maybe, you deserve to be accompanied, not just followed. When an Aquarius with Life Path 1 enters the phase of true transformation, they no longer need a pedestal to feel worthy, because by then they understand. Light doesn't need a spotlight. It radiates naturally when you are in the right frequency, the right place, the right role. They are still initiators, still pioneers, still the ones who see paths no one else has imagined yet. But they no longer need to shout, "I was the first." They move quietly now, and it is that steady presence that others begin to follow. I once worked with an elder client at Jinjin's Cosmic. His name was James, 58 years old, an Aquarius with Life Path 1. He had spent his life as a strategic consultant, known as the man no one dared debate. He told me, "When I was younger, my biggest fear was being underestimated. So I made sure I was always the smartest person in the room." But after retirement, he began practicing Qigong, writing meditation prose, and teaching small nature classes for children. He smiled and said, "Now, I feel more useful than ever, and no one even knows what I used to be." He no longer needed to be called a leader. He simply needed to live as a peaceful human being, to let his energy flow outward without trying to control where it lands. At Jinjin's Cosmic, we call this the maturity of the One. When you stop leading from fear and start radiating from awakened presence, you begin to listen. You stop reacting to everything as if it were a debate. You no longer need to win the logic you want to truly understand. And here's the beautiful paradox. The moment you stop forcing others to follow or understand, you begin to attract the ones who truly match your frequency. They come, not because you are above them, but because you are fully, authentically you. To you who are learning to transform from leading to radiating, may you always remember, a soul that truly shines never needs to climb, and a soul that is truly real never needs to prove anything through words. You are already enough, not when others recognize you, but when you can look at yourself with eyes that do not judge. If you're an Aquarius with Life Path number 1, you've probably grown used to walking alone down roads. Few understand, and even fewer are willing to follow. Not because you're wrong, but because you see too deeply, feel too broadly, and maybe you just arrived a little earlier than the rest of the world. At Jinjin's Cosmic, we believe that every soul is a universe in miniature, carrying its own map, its own rhythm, its own frequency. And when you learn to pause, to listen inward, to read that map from within, you'll find that you no longer need answers from the outside. You don't need to try to become someone else. You don't need to chase a template just to feel worthy. You simply need to return to yourself clear enough, true enough, and gentle enough to breathe, to live, and to keep going. Because as one meditation teacher once said, you don't need to change the world, you just need to pause long enough, and the world will begin to change inside of you. To you, the one who carries the revolutionary light of Aquarius and the steadfast will of Life Path 1. May you always be strong enough to lead with truth, and soft enough to allow yourself to pause, to rest, to not be ready, to be imperfect and still, to know you are worthy of love. If something I shared today touched you, leave a comment, a heart, a small sign to let me know that somewhere out there we've connected. And if you feel called to walk this path a little longer, don't forget to follow Jin's Cosmic, because the journey of healing, truth, and gentle light is still unfolding here. For souls who are walking, pausing, or just beginning, the universe is never in a rush. And you don't have to be either.